Hello everyone, this is Rifa and welcome to my new art tutorial. So today's video is going to be about how to paint the glowing mountains. So I have my Factor Note sketchbook and Himi Mia jelly gouache set, and as usual I have my Himi brushes. So I'll link all the materials in the description. You can check them out. And if you are new to my channel, please do subscribe and click the bell icon. So I'm going to show you two glowing mountainscapes. So first one is with a dark sky and they have some glowing sunlight effect on it. So for the dark sky, I started with a Prussian blue color. So certain gouache paints are not that much opaque, so they will be semi-transparent or semi-opaque. So in such cases we need to apply two layers of paint. So in the case of this Prussian blue, it is also not that much opaque, so I will need to add two layers since we can see the brush strokes in between even after drying. So I'm applying the second layer for the sky. So I've done a very light sketch of the mountains and then started with the sky. So you can use a flat brush if you want for large areas, but sometimes I use this round brush for my whole painting. And then I moved to the mountain. So there are certain dark areas on the mountain and the opposite side of which is light with a glow, which is the glow achieved by the sunlight. So for the dark areas I'm filling a burnt umber shade. So I'm filling those areas entirely with this burnt umber shade. So you can use acrylics for the same paintings because I'm using gouache as acrylic. I'm layering them just the way I layer with acrylic paints. So first I'm doing all the blocking process. So this is the process in which we just fill the entire canvas or paper with the colors and then we do the details. So for the glowing part, I'm adding yellow ochre base color. So blocking process will make your canvas look fuller and it won't give that fear of seeing a blank canvas. And there are certain areas where there is snow on these mountains, so for that I added a cool gray. So I got this cool gray color by adding white, blue and black. So next I am detailing. So I'm just making this snow area first. So there are certain areas where there are little bit of snow scattering on the mountains. So I'm just adding a base for that area using a detailing brush. So I'm using the same colors in these steps so that we get that effect of mountains, because the edges won't be this much sharp. There will be certain colors overlapping the other color. So I'm using some dry brush technique in certain areas so that you can get that effect. So whenever I paint snow, I add this cool gray color as a base color, so it will give a shadow effect when we add highlights. Now using the same burnt umber shade, I'm adding certain details overlapping the snow part. So just add few lines to show that details of the mountains. So all the details are going to be either lines or dots. So painting mountains is not that much difficult. It might look a very detailed and difficult one, but it is not that much difficult. All you need to understand is the light and shadow and just the structure of the mountain that you're going to paint. So you can just understand the structure by observing references. So I prefer using references if you are a beginner, and just go on with the line and dot details. That's it. So we first add the base color as block in process, and then we slowly add each details and highlights. So painting mountainscapes will make you study the light and shadows very much easier. Just paint few mountainscapes and you will understand the light and shadow, how to observe these light and shadows. Yeah. And the next layer, I'm adding a few more details on the yellow ochre part. For this, I mixed a little bit of brown to the yellow ochre, and then I'm adding the shadows. So I'm just adding depth to the shadow part. So for this, I've mixed a little bit of black to that bird umber and then added the details. So I always wanted to paint these glowing mountains. Also, I'm a big fan of glowing clouds. So clouds are very trickier thing to paint. You need a lot of practice to learn to paint the clouds. So I just thought of painting glowing mountains this time. And I just love how these large mountains give so much depth and definition to your landscape paintings. Once I complete the shadow part, then I moved for highlighting that glowing part of my mountains. So I used a medium yellow shade first. So I'm just adding very few highlights in that part. So adding more highlights will ruin the shadows. And for that glow effect, I just added very few orange details also. So this orange shade will give very much glowing effect to that part. And then I did the highlights again by using some lemon yellow and white. So you can see everything is about adding lines and dots. That's how I detail my mountains. And the mountain will look more detailed once you paint or highlight the snows. So for that I use white paint, very thick white paint to add highlights in that snow part. So this part is in the shadow area, so I won't be adding that much highlights. I'm adding very few details, and I will also add few details on the glowing part. So the snow is very scattered. I just feel that it is showing a change of climate where the snow is starting to melt, so that there are very few areas with snow and the other areas showing the bare mountain. Adding these white highlights is my favorite part in any snow painting because it gives that final touch to your painting and it will look so much completed and content. And lastly, I just added a crescent moon and that's it. So this is how my first glowing mountain painting looked like. And the next one was a very much glowing mountain. So for this we have a very glowing sunset sky. So I started with the base of the sky with a lemon yellow and gradually added gradient. So then I added some orange shade and blended that to the yellow, and then as we move up we have this blue sky. So just added few white strokes in between and then added a very pale blue color, and to blend that color I added white again. So this is a very glowy sunset sky with some glowing mountains. So the mountain at the top part is going to be shining in that reflection of sky. So I added a very yellow ochre base for that, and all other mountains are going to be a bit dark. And for the shadow part I added very little brown to that yellow ochre and filled that area, and the rest of the mountains are dark but they have this sunset glow throughout them. So I added a burnt orange shade as a base. So for this I just mix a brown to orange color. So if any of you are recreating my paintings, please do tag me on Instagram under the handle freehand. I would love to share them on my stories. Now for detailing the mountains, I started with the darker area. So for that I'm adding the shadows first. So for the shadows I'm using a gray shade. So I mixed a very little white to black and added very few blue shade also, and then added some random strokes to indicate that shadows. So I'm adding the folds of mountains in this step. So we have very much shadows at the bottom part and very little shadows as we go towards the upper part of the paper. So make sure you just leave that folding effect of mountains whenever you add shadows. So the shadows give depth to that folds of mountains. So this is a very crucial step in a mountainscape. And once I completed this part, I added some, it's not highlight, it's somewhat like a mid-tone kind of detailing. So again added a little bit more white to this gray, and then added very few details very close to this particular gray details, and then I added the shadows with some dark orange color. I again added very few brown shade. So this is not the burnt umber brown, this is something like burnt sienna that I have added to the orange shade. So with the same shade I added details on the shadow part of that glowing mountain. Then is the highlighting part. So for highlights I again used medium yellow color and added very thick strokes of highlights on these orange mountains. I also mixed some white and added another highlighting layer, and the next is the glowing mountain. So for that I'm adding the shadows in that light area of the mountain. So I used yellow ochre again to add that folds, and then did the highlights using lemon yellow. So I just tried to add very few highlights in the other mountains also using the same shade so that it would give a blended effect, and then added some white to the lemon yellow and added few more highlights. So painting a glowing mountain is all about highlighting. The more you highlight, the more glow you will get. So make sure you add lots of layers of highlights. And I'm again doing with the shadows. I added very few black and did that, and I felt that it lacks very few glow, so I just added a titanium white layer also, and lastly a crescent moon, a large crescent moon. So that's how my glowing mountainscape looks like. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video and it was very helpful. See you in the next video, and thank you so much for watching.